In this week's episode, Garden Friends, we're going to talk about a category of plants that can do so many things for your garden, from creating beautiful vertical interest to providing shade, cooling a wall, but more importantly, bringing in some beautiful pollinators and bugs, wildlife, birds, and everything that you love into your garden. And of course, I'm talking about vines, friends.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of Green Acres and our guests. These general gardening tips and suggestions may work for you, as well as those from alternative sources. When using any garden products or tools, read and follow all label directions. And learn how to make your yard summer strong at bewatersmart.info.
The Green Acres Garden Podcast is the podcast dedicated to helping gardeners hone their growing skills while we celebrate our love of plants. So whether you're new to growing or a seasoned gardener, you're sure to learn something new. Join the fun as we have conversations with world-class growers, passionate green thumbs, and professional garden experts from Green Acres Nursery and Supply. Listen every week. We'll answer questions you didn't know you had. And away we grow, garden friends. It's that time of the week, time to cultivate some garden knowledge and hopefully have a little fun in the process. I'm your host, Kevin Jordan, your resident plant guy and garden dude, back in studio for another great episode. In studio with Austin on the audio.
Hey, hello everybody, and welcome back to the show. Kevin, what are we digging into this week?
This week, we are going to delve into a category of plants that I love. I think these are plants that sometimes get a bad rap a little bit
Really?
for those who don't know.
Okay.
But for those who know, they know what's up.
They know.
And I'm talking about plants that have evolved over the past few million years to kind of compete with other plants. So all the plants, they need sunlight, air, water, soil, nutrients, right? So some plants like trees put a lot of effort into racing to the sun, and they put a lot of effort into their trunks, their stems.
Right.
Some plants don't worry about that. They're the ones that the trailers, they stay on the ground. They're happy to be low. But I'm talking about vines, plants that realized, hey, I don't have to put a lot of effort into all my stems and trunks and creating a ton of wood and do all that. I'm going to let you do all that tree next to me, and I'm going to climb up you, and I'm going to get to more sunshine. I'm going to get off the ground. And actually, what's nice about that is the vines, it allows them to get closer to the sunshine, and it tends to actually protect them from herbivores and pests that would normally get them if they were just growing like prostrate on the ground. Kind of more horizontal. So for them, it's been a great adaptation to survive.
Yeah, I like that.
The pressures of this harsh world and the harsh environments they may grow in. But what's cool about vines is there's so many different vines out there. We've got evergreen, we've got deciduous, we've got edible vines, we've got ones that grow in the shade, ones that can tolerate full sun, smaller vines that can handle smaller situations. And like I said, they get a bad rap because you hear,
why do they get a bad rap?
Oh, I had to rip out all this ivy. Oh, it's usually ivy.
Okay.
Or some weeds tend to be, viney a little bit. But ultimately, some of those characteristics that can make some plants a little quirky, it just makes them fantastic options and problem solvers for a lot of us home growers and gardeners. And I don't want to step too much on Kiki's toes because she's going to get deep into it. But I just want to say, I love vines. I think they rock. They're so cool out in nature. You know what another name for vines is?
What's that?
Liana.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful name.
Totally cool name.
Liana,
yeah.
I love that.
So vines just rock, and I think, like I said, by the end of this episode, you will want to get a vine, at least one in your garden. I think every garden needs, if not deserves, some vines because they do so much.
I totally agree, and what a great way to start this off because we have a great guest to talk to about all, this cool vine world, right?
The best guest.
Yes, we've got Kiki. So Kiki is a joy to have on the show. She's full of energy and knowledge, and I'm excited to jump into it. So let's go ahead and go to our interview with Kiki. We sat down with her at the Green Acres in Folsom. Let's check it out. Here we go.
So I'm here with Kiki of the Folsom Green Acres. Kiki, how's it been since I've seen you?
Pretty excellent. I have zero complaints. I went to Europe, which was amazing.
Whoa, nice. What countries?
I went to Austria, Germany, and France.
Very cool.
And
Okay.
I've decided
I'm jealous.
I
I've
have
never
to go
been.
back because I have to go see all the gardens when they're all in bloom.
There we go. Springtime travel. Well, it's so nice to have you. Since I last saw you, I found out that you were in a Star Trek cover band, and I got to say, may you live long and prosper. That is so cool. Very cool. So we're here to talk vines with Kiki. I personally love vines, Kiki. I think they get a little bit of a bad rap sometimes in the garden. Oh, I had to rip out this ivy. Oh, I got vines growing up into my... So I want to dispel all that this week. I want to get
Absolutely.
people informed and fired up on just the wonderful nature that is vines. So please, without further ado...
Shall I unleash the vine kraken?
Yes, unleash the dragon that is Kiki.
All right.
Why vines, Kiki?
So first and foremost, it allows you to create new vertical space in your garden. Or it could be a small patio. It could even be, if you live in an apartment, on your outside deck.
It's a good point.
Maybe you need a little bit of greenery to cheer you up,
Oh, yeah.
but you don't have a lot of space. So that is the magic of vines. I cannot tell you how often I'm helping people that only have a space that's maybe a foot wide, and they want a whole wall of privacy. And they didn't think it through when they put down all that concrete, and they only have like a foot to 2 feet of
open soil.
Open soil. So what are you going to do? A vine.
Grow up, yeah.
Right? So the vertical interest is really important. And not only is it functional, because you can provide shade, you can make a living privacy screen, you can create a cooling wall of an evergreen vine, right?
Catch that late afternoon sun a little bit.
Exactly. And so, that also soaks up heat. It'll make your space cooler, right? So not only can you have it functional, but you're also making it beautiful so that you want to hang out there more often, or maybe you want to have some more friends over, right? That's the whole goal. So when we're talking about vines, open up your mind to think about, where do you want this privacy screen? And the coolest thing is, if you do only have 1 foot or 2 feet of soil, guess what? They're great in containers. Right?
They can handle that.
They can really handle that. So, you can really think outside of the box, and I encourage everybody to do that. And there are vines that cover 40 feet, and there are vines that only cover 8 feet or 6 feet or even smaller than that.
And not all vines are the same.
Not all vines are the same. And just in talking about that, there's flowering vines, there's fragrant vines, there's evergreen vines, there's vines that have really cool textures.
So much variety.
Exactly.
I was just walking the aisles before we started, and there's so much to look at, even right now in the dead of winter.
Exactly. And not only that, but, really making your yard interesting. And then when you start putting in companion plants with it, you can really create an entire oasis. And not only an oasis for yourself, but what about, if you have something like a pyracantha that is going to bloom in the spring, and it's more of kind of a shrubby kind of a vine.
That firethorn.
Yeah, and it essentially, in the fall, it will produce bright clusters of red berries. And I, every year, have migrating waxwing cedar birds that come through and get drunk and
just
devastate
gobble 'em
it.
up.
Right. And so you can really entice wildlife into your space too.
Well, that's a good point, because I think in one of our past episodes, you spent a lot of time, actually, I would recommend people go back and find it, where we talked a lot about how to bring in pollinators into your landscape, whatever the birds, the bees, all of it. And are there vines that do that as well? I mean, is that suitable?
Yeah. One right off the bat that, for example, the passion vine. I have the ornamental type. I don't have the type that fruits.
Is that passiflora?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love it so much because it's really hardy. The blooms are absolutely stunning.
Oh, yeah.
And it brings all kinds of cool critters in. I get mason bees that are constantly going in for the pollen.
They're so intricate and beautiful.
Yes. And then I have the Gulf fritillary butterfly that comes for the nectar and then ends up laying eggs because it's its host plant. So then I start to raise butterflies at my house, which I've talked about before.
You're all children
Yes,
now.
come.
Stretch your wings. Come to the garden.
So, obviously, if you get a flowering vine that produces a flower which will produce nectar or pollen, you are going to have pollinators coming, whether it's bees or butterflies or hummingbirds, and that is one of the most beautiful things. So not only are you going to feed them, so when they're going to find food...
It's like inviting me to dinner. You do it, I'm going to show up. Pretty likely. Almost, just a slight under 100%.
Well, then
chance.
are you going to move in? Because something like a little hummingbird, if it finds a space where it's got protection and food, it very well likely is going to find a little place to make a nest. And so that's another cool thing. So if you have that small space and all of a sudden you put in a vine that is giving some coverage, that also can be a little home for a small bird,
Safe
like a
haven.
wren or a hummingbird. And so, it's by doing things like that that you're going to bring in cool creatures. And if you attract bees and butterflies, well, guess who's going to come and try to hunt those guys? Praying mantis. So you start to get really good, healthy bugs.
Nice little food web
into
going
your
on.
space. Yeah, and so it can really change the dynamic of stuff.
That is so cool.
And the other thing that's really important is vines, because their whole life is all about climbing, right? There's actually 4 different characteristic types. There's one that is the tendril type. So that would be like a passion vine. And you'll notice they send out these kind of angelic-like little antennae, and they grow so fast. You always will see that in nature shows where they do time-lapse photography.
Yeah.
It's reached out like, almost a foot and is grabbing something and twining itself around it. And so tendrils are these little coils that allow it to anchor, and then the rest of the vine goes and follows.
It's incredible to see one that's like, we've had one that grew up a broomstick right onto the side of our house as a morning glory.
You know what?
Did it in the afternoon, I feel like.
Another good tendril vine are grapes. That's how grapes work.
Well, now you're getting into the edibles.
And sweet peas, right?
So, all right, well, you brought up grapes. I love them. Delicious. Love a good fresh table grape.
Yeah.
But are there other edible vines that you'd recommend?
Well, absolutely. Like a nasturtium is also an edible vine.
Oh, you can get, the climbing nasturtium.
It's
They're
a
spicy.
little kitchen vine, right? I mean, every part of that plant's edible. You can eat the flowers in your salad. You could also eat the leaves.
The leaves
I
are good,
believe
yeah.
so,
Man,
too.
they were
Little
like,
peppery.
has that radishy,
Add it
yeah.
to your salad, be delish. There's also green beans. I think cucumbers. Just a variety of different things. And so, when you think about vines, there can be edible vines, there can be fragrant vines, there can be floral vines.
I love a good kiwi myself.
Evergreen. So if you don't want to have bees around or anything, maybe you want to just do, all green all the time and just keep it really, really simple.
So something just foliage alone.
Just foliage alone.
I saw one out there that's one of my favorites. I used to always love recommending it to people who they said, I have a wall, I just want something to just climb up it and just cover it.
The creeping fig.
Yes, that ficus pumila or whatever. It's such a beautiful little plant.
And that actually brings us to another type of a climbing vine, because the ficus does the aerial root.
Okay, yeah.
Just like the ivy and Boston ivy.
And that's their adaptation for gripping and grabbing.
They kind of have these little, they kind of shoot out little almost roots wherever they touch, and that's kind of how they attach. And the thing you got to be careful with those guys is they kind of leave a footprint behind.
Oh, yeah.
So if they start climbing on your house and you have a stucco house, you may want to remove that.
Yeah.
Because if you pull it off, you'll see that it kind of leaves little bits of, I guess a good way to describe it is a footprint behind.
Yeah.
So I would also encourage you not to let them grow over windows or in crevices and stuff like that. You know.
Good
You got
advice.
to watch vines.
For sure.
And another type are twining vines. So twining vines can be in 2 types. They can be in a leaf twine, and a perfect example of that is clematis. So deciduous
Love
clematis actually climbs with their leaves.
Now, does understanding the type of vine that you have, does that change the way that you would maintain it, take care of it, and approach it?
It changes your approach on the support structure, right?
Okay.
So all these climbers need something to attach themselves to. The thing you think about right off the bat is a trellis.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you're going to use usually a wooden or a metal sturdy trellis, and it should be anchored to the ground, to the wall, or something, right?
Doesn't just flop over.
Once something starts climbing on it, it's going to create weight on that
Yeah.
structure. So exactly what you're saying. You really need to pay attention. A wisteria can just be a monster.
Oh, yeah.
They can literally climb themselves into a tree. Not only an opposite tree as like a host to climb up, but they can twine their twine so hard together that they become a self-standing tree.
And they certainly would need, out of all these, probably a stronger level
my God.
arbor for sure.
Yes.
Something very
or
sturdy.
a pergola, like
Yeah.
a real structure that they're climbing on that can really handle support. So you definitely need to take into consideration some major important things, which is the height, the growth rate, and the width of the vine.
Because they're not all the same.
They're not all the same, and it depends. Are you wanting to cover a 20-foot wall? Then you want to get something that's really going to give you massive amounts of coverage, right?
Yeah.
Like a trumpet vine, or maybe like a cross vine. Tangerine beauty is a pretty hardy vine.
Well, my back fence was see-through. It was like a deer fence, and so we planted the pink bower vine up it.
Oh, very
And now
pretty.
it's evergreen, so
Yes.
it's a natural screen, and then we get some blossoms
And
here
so
and
the
there.
bower vine is a great example because also you want to kind of pay attention to the exposure. As with anything, when you live in our area, the summers get really, really hot. So you always want to think about June, July, August, September. Where is the sun? So you can figure out, like, in the hottest time
Will
of
your
the
vine
year,
tolerate that?
is it
Yeah.
going to tolerate that? Do you need a full sun vine? Do you need something that handles filtered light? Do you need something that's full shade? And so, like, the bower vine is great because it's really good for part shade. It wants morning sun.
That's what I get.
And then afternoon shade. And one of my favorites is the variegated bower vine because
pretty.
it's so bright, right?
Yeah.
So those are just some things. So it's not only a trellis that they can climb up, but you could get wires or fishing line, and you could make them horizontal and wrap them around a nail or something. If you want to just get really creative and do something that's not so expensive. But
Well, that's like how
again,
grapes are grown, right?
Yeah.
They just have the wires out there.
but
they
you just
run
have
those.
to think about how heavy something is going to get, especially if you don't get out there and prune it, because it's just going to keep growing en masse if it's evergreen year after year.
That's a good point. We cultivated some kiwis at a garden at Sac State with my students years ago, and so we had five females for fruiting, and then we had one male there for pollinizing.
And they went crazy?
They went crazy. We had tons of fruit, and it's like November, December. I think I remember the harvest, hundreds of pounds off of just 5 vines. Luckily, they had
Wow.
beautiful steel structure arbors that could really support it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we had to prune them back and give them a haircut from time. But it was so worth it. I loved it, man.
Yeah, right?
So delicious.
And you're growing something, and it's also maybe creating a little shade. So that's another really cool thing that you can do is, if you're utilizing a vine, let's say that you want to create a little bit of shade and you want to set up a, some sort of trellis, and if you set it up just in the right space, it's going to create a little shade for your little weeping Japanese maple, right?
Yeah.
So there's little things that you can do like that where you can problem solve.
Create a little microclimate.
Yeah, and make something really, really pretty. It's one of the coolest things that you can do. The best pairing is a climbing rose and clematis. So if you have an older rose, and you know how the base of the rose can often not have any branches or any points of interest, and it just looks bare and kind of ugly, well, you could plant a little clematis at the base, and you plant it far enough away so it doesn't interfere with the root ball of the rose, but you could just have that little guy
Share space a
just
little bit.
will climb up it. And so you have a mixture of clematis and roses, which if you've looked at the pictures, oh my God, it is gorgeous, right?
Oh, yeah. The
Really.
Rose Queens we go to, they always have them paired together.
Oh, I bet,
For
right?
sure,
Because
yeah.
they're so pretty. But, Also, if we're talking about a smaller scale and you're in that little apartment, right, you could do a pot with a small trellis or something small, or you could even do hanging baskets and have some vines hanging out.
Let it trail.
Right? I mean, vinca could easily be used as a vine slash, trailing out of a...
Vinca minor or whatever. Yeah.
Or illumination is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
That bright yellow variegation.
Nice.
Ooh, add some spice. Also, like little window boxes or containers. It's just a really cool way to be able to do it.
That's a great point. I was out there and I was getting all fired up for the episode, and I saw the Hardenbergia.
Oh,
The lilac vine. Yes,
vine.
very pretty. It blooms right now, and that kind of led me to thinking, like, what are the ways where people can kind of like maybe wrap their head around a vine or the bloom period, or like, we talked about how some don't bloom, some like the creeping fig, some are edible, but a lot of them bloom and are gorgeous. How can we get the most out of those blossoms, and can we plan to have some that bloom? 'Cause it's kind of nice to have the garden, like I said, the Hardenbergia is looking good now. Everything else is kind of, not. It's what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so
on
the
that,
Hardenbergia
seasonality?
is great. It's an evergreen vine. It's not too giant of a vine, so it's going to be kind of a medium grower. It's not going to get 40 feet long. It's also going to be more morning sun, afternoon shade. So you're going to want to have it in filtered light or, out of the hot afternoon sun, because it just won't really like that. And it's a spring bloomer. So it's going to be gorgeous from the end of winter going into early spring. And then the rest of the year, it's just going to be this beautiful evergreen
Those
canopy.
nice long leaves.
Yeah. And so sometimes what you can do is, if you have a space, and if you want it to be evergreen, you could either take something like the Hardenbergia that blooms in the spring, and then what if you take that lavender trumpet vine that blooms later on in the year, and you have them both in that same space. So you get color in the spring, and then you also get color later in the year. You could do the same thing if you wanted to have an evergreen vine together with a deciduous or perennial vine, right? So that you can always make sure that, maybe one of the vines is evergreen, so after it finishes blooming, you just have a beautiful, lush green space, and then it'll give the other vine an opportunity to bring forth its flowers later on in the year.
Well, you bring up a good point. Other than the Hardenbergia, what are some of your favorite, like, blooming evergreen vines?
I gotta say, I know this is kind of weird, but the
never.
cathedral sausage vine is really one of my favorite vines. So it is
Cathedral sausage vine. Okay.
It has really kind of small-ish, whitish, maybe light pink flowers that are very, very fragrant. And I believe it only blooms in the spring. But this is a vine that you can have in full shade.
Oh.
So you got to think about when we're talking about full shade, and people are like, I want something that flowers. Well, that's not full shade, because you got to think you have to have enough sunlight to that plant so it can create a bloom. So if you have a space that is just in full shade all the time and doesn't get morning sun, doesn't get filtered light, the sausage vine is perfect. It has a beautiful leaf. It really, I have it in a container, and it just is beautiful all the time.
Can't wait. I got to check it out.
It never looks bad.
Okay, well, let's flip it. Let's imagine that same spot, evergreen bloomer, but now it's raging hot.
I think one of the biggest heavy-duty workers is star jasmine, and that's just because
Trachelospermum.
you get the fragrance. You get a wall of deliciousness, right? Or fanciful, or whatever you're putting it on. And they are really, really hardy. As long as this is another important thing to talk about, you really want to make sure that you're giving your vines good drainage. You really want to make sure you compost them. You really want to make sure you mulch, so that if it is, for an example, in the full sun, like your star jasmine, that you put some mulch around there to keep that root ball cool. Clematis is always known for that. They love to have a little bit of light on their vine, but they really want that root ball cool. It'll help them bloom profusely, but you really want to watch that. So if you kind of keep the root ball cooler, I just think they do better overall. And you definitely want to make sure you're also fertilizing them during the growing season to really promote healthy growth and flowering if they're doing it. So, for example, right now in the springtime or late winter, early spring, you want to make sure that it's after any heavy frost, which I don't know if we're going to have another frost again.
It was been pretty chilly the last few weeks, but I think
been
it's
chilly.
starting to warm up.
But it's also been in the 60 during the day.
Yeah, the days
so
are warm, the nights are
everything
cold.
is budding out. So we're in that precarious time.
Oh yeah, I have an early season peach tree that's already kind of popping a little bit.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Right?
So we'll see.
You just want to be careful, but you want to feed when you really start to see buds coming out to really help it grow the leaves, help it form the buds that you want it to.
So you're saying, okay, so time to feed late winter, early spring for most of these?
I would
do
that.
Whenever they're starting to bloom.
Yeah,
with the
whenever you
Hardenbergia.
start to see a sign of life. Obviously, if it's a perennial or deciduous, you're going to start to see green poking out. Clematis is a great example of that, right? They will usually at their nodes, they'll start to sprout out their cute little leaves. And then that's time, like, hey,
it needs a little nutrition.
I need food, right?
It's like my child in the morning. Yeah, they let
right?
you know.
100%.
For sure. Well, okay, you did some great examples with the evergreen vines, but what are some of your favorite go-to, I'd say, deciduous vines, ones that are going to go dormant?
Hands down, one of the most beautiful, gorgeous, stunning that everybody remembers seeing is wisteria.
Yeah.
Wisteria is absolutely incredible. Clusters. And there's lots of different varieties. Some can be more blue, some can be more purple. They're all pretty much deciduous. Some varietals actually can bloom more than once. So some, they're known to be a springtime bloomer. And by the way, very, very fragrant. So if you're going for fragrance, you want to think of star jasmine, pink jasmine, wisteria, honeysuckle. Certain types
I love honeysuckle.
of honeysuckle are not fragrant. Certain types are. So again, just a little researching on kind of what you want.
I feel like the wisteria too, are they good for pollinators? Because I feel like every time I see one and when it's in bloom, the bees,
the mason
fat
bees.
little bees are all over it and just loving life.
They are, 100%. So that is probably one of the most stunning and unforgettable when you see them. You do need to be careful with those because they can grow like no other. They are a twining stem, so they basically are going to shoot out of the ground and they are actually looking for a surface to wrap around either clockwise or anti-clockwise. And that's actually written in the gene of the plant which direction they twine, which I think is very interesting. So, hands down, if you have a pergola in the springtime,
large, strong structure.
Oh my God, it's just going to be incredible.
Well, I'm ready. I'm ready to go plant some vines. I hope our listeners are fired up as well. Thank you so much for making time for us. We love having you on. You're the coolest, Kiki. I wish our listeners could meet you in person. I bet they would just love you.
I love coming. I always get so excited. And, the thing I'm going to tell you, the coolest part about gardening is you can never know it all. It never, ever is boring. Ever.
Yeah, there's always something
You can
new.
go down all these little rabbit holes and just learn something new all the time. And, you can get really deep with companion planting, in gardening. If you think about, too, like I was talking about perennials, if you're growing green beans, you want to put some marigolds in front of it as a natural little kind of pest control. There's just all kinds of things. Lavender can work really well like that, too. Plants that kind of have a smell to them are usually very good pest repellents.
Yep. Oh, hey, plants need friends too.
Yes.
So thank you so much for making time. I learned so much from you. Is there anything else you want to say before I let you go?
I just say, do a little research. Really think about what you love because that is the most important thing because you're going to be surrounded by it. And then think about also how much effort you want to put into it. if you want something simple, do something evergreen that's not going to be too out of control, so you don't have to prune it all the time. Think about the space that you're filling. Really make sure that the support structure that you're going to use is, attached to something, or maybe is mortared into the ground, so it's not going to be flopping around with those high winds that we get now. Just kind of plan.
Perfect. Well, Kiki, thank you so much once again, and hopefully we'll get to talk once more in the
Are you
future about
kidding?
something else.
The year is just starting. I'm sure we will.
There we go. I like it.
All right, and we are back from our chat with Kiki. Big thank you to Kiki. And now, Kevin, I'm going to throw it to you. We covered a lot of ground there,
Yep.
but did we hit it all? Is that the
It's
vine?
a great start.
Okay.
But, there's so many vines out there.
Yeah.
Let this be the beginning on your vine adventure. One of the best ways to learn, is to learn from other people. But I'd beg, the best way to learn is to get out there and just do things yourself. And so when it comes to vines, do your research on what
Yep.
vine's going to work best for you. If you want them evergreen, deciduous, if you want a fast grower, you want something a little slower, you want something that's going to handle the harsh sun and heat, or something that's going to give you some beauty in the shade. I think there's a vine out there for every situation if you're creative enough. So hopefully people are engaged in this, inspired a little bit. Vines can be great problem solvers in the garden. And like we mentioned in that interview, they're wonderful at bringing in wildlife, pollinators, and all these incredible creatures that we love to see out in the garden. So there's so many the benefits are nearly limitless when it comes to planting plants, especially vines. So hopefully people get inspired by this, have learned a little bit, and will take action.
I hope so,
because it's planting
too.
time. It's time to get
That's
going.
what it's all about. I think the only big thing to think about is like pruning, right? Because they want to spread out. So what do you say? You just keep them trimmed back,
Well,
right?
she brought up some great ideas. The pruning, you can really direct growth. If they get a little leggy, plants tend to do the opposite of what you do. So if they're growing really tall and outwards, you can cut those limbs back. That'll help push out more lateral growth. If it's really bushy and you want it to grow up, you can trim some of those lateral ones and kind of force some more vertical growth. So pruning is essential, especially for these vines when you're training them on an arbor or along a fence. Sometimes it's nice to give them a little haircut as needed, so they don't work their way into a portion of your garden that you didn't want them to be.
Sure.
So just give them a haircut. It doesn't take that much skill.
Cool.
Anybody can do it.
I love that. Well, thank you to Kiki. It was great to see you and have you on the show again. Thank you so much. And Kevin, I'm going to throw it back to you to take us out.
Well, thank you, Kiki, and thank you to all of our beautiful listeners, all you gorgeous gardeners out there. We love having you here each and every week. Please share us with a friend. And until next week, be good to yourselves and others. Happy gardening to you all, and please
Never stop growing.
We'll see you next time.